Nani Bourgeot, citizens of the First Nations in southwestern Ontario, southwest region of the Anishinaabeg Nation. We're glad that you were able to join us tonight. We're bringing forward some very important information, kind of two aspects to it. One is that it's an opportunity for us to talk about an Anishinaabe Declaration on Citizenship, which is very different from the citizenship law. What this declaration does is it gives a very strong political statement to the government to quit tinkering around and trying to determine our citizenship. You will hear from presenters this evening that are talking about the process that the federal government is trying to implement that is actually no good to our communities. All it does is delay the elimination of our people by one generation. We're going to hear more about that. But what's important with the discussion we're having about the declaration tonight is that we need to take a stand and be ready to preempt any proposed legislation about citizenship because we have the right, we have the inherent right and the sovereign right to determine who our citizens are. And the federal government, I don't know how many times over the many decades, they keep trying to tinker with, who our citizens are, and all they do is continue to goof it up. There's always constantly problems with it. So our goal is to respond very proactively to Canada's agenda, not react. We're going to be proactive, relying on our strength as an Anishinaabe nation and relying on our inherent rights. And so to get the program started off in the right way, I've asked Anya Sants to do the good way Wingazit and Anishinaabe. And this is an important, guiding principles that the elders put in place with respect to, the Constitution of the Chinook Nagawin of the Anishinaabe Nation. And it really goes to, highlight, our inherent rights and our sovereignty, that applies to this discussion we're having tonight. So, Anya, if you do that, please.
Donna's on.
Okay, Donna, miigwech Donna. Glad
Okay.
you're able. Donna?
Yeah.
Anishinaabe kwe.
Naha Busho. Busho verdi kweden ginin de gonish na be kwenda gi kondo temawe. Ikegen ning not magna. Mr. Jikumi get chain de benjet mi get chanan get cook misanik mishos snanik. Quick me wrong gi no chipet go big. The webs in Dutch gate, Jibito ki no shekenda sick. Minoge wanda gin kita agent mi get chanan again no shekchina kiachin da kinege we she tas chiga de women questa ding nango. Midasha Jikweki Diamadango de Angis in Nishnabe. Eventually, San and Nishnabe and a king, Gibetgon Garden in the Watson. Shkoden, Beke, Noden, Gibetgostonen, we not doing Ming, on Pishkak Mikam. Eventually, they give me none get stolen dog and Nishnaben one Nagdojin. And then Nish was stricken nomad winning. Sagi win, Deboy win, Naden moin, Boka win. Baden diswin, quick what swin, Mino shak devin. Eventually, Kimin gonna dead Benewi Nagdoin ding. Kavnodin Danagabe Shoebak, Minogan and Gomego Shoebak, Minogi Yabewan Shoebak. Which mother Tamek quick for much in studying. So this is the preamble that's contained in our Anishinaabe Nation Chinook Nagawin. It's the preamble to our Constitution, and it outlines for us all the gifts that were given to us as Anishinaabe people, and also all our the roles and responsibilities that we have to ensure that that we're living the minomatsu in a good life. So we have all our teachings are contained in this preamble, and it also speaks to how everything that we do, which is part of the governance work that we're doing now, that we always look back 7 generations and we look ahead 7 generations as we live in here in the present, so that everything that we do is based on the foundations that are contained in this preamble. So I'm very glad to be able to recite it for you and to get this meeting started. This opens our meeting now for discussion. So with that, I say miigwech, 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 miigwech.
So again, Donna, miigwech, and as I said, we owe you a truckload of virtual tobacco for participating, and we'll get that tobacco to you when we cross paths
Yes.
Normally, the regional chief for the Southwest region would be commenting now in terms of opening remarks, but he's indicated to us he's tied up with some council business tonight. But nonetheless, the importance of this declaration, as I said in my opening remarks, is crucial for creating awareness in our communities that the federal government is again tinkering, with our people, and their solutions are not solutions. All they do, as I said, is delay the elimination of our people from our roles as citizens of our communities by one generation. So we have been spending quite a bit of time on this Ibn law, which is, as I said, different from the declaration. But we're advocating, this one-parent rule. We're going to highlight to you, some of the pitfalls of what the federal government is doing, but also highlight the importance of the work that's going to happen in our communities. And there is no time sensitivity that this gets done like that. We need to spend the time for a very robust discussion in each of our communities. We don't want a checkerboard approach to citizenship, so I think there's going to be some fundamental common threads, in terms of how we approach the issue of citizenship. But again, that'll leave room for individual characteristics that may relate to each of your communities. So I think it's very important that people hear this, and also very important that you share this with your families, you share this with your neighbors. Any information you hear tonight, there's a series of the 4 of these virtual meetings. This declaration that was started probably about a month ago now at a meeting that was held in Sault Ste. Marie. Jeanette will talk a little bit about that. We're going to be having 4 virtual sessions culminating with more information at regional meetings that are happening throughout April. And hopefully by the Grand Council, this declaration will be ratified. Just again, for those that may or may not be aware, when the constitutional talks were happening, it was very important for the chiefs to send a strong message to the federal government that they can't be impacting our Aboriginal and treaty rights, our inherent rights. This declaration that we're proposing right now, the declaration on Ibn-Daljig, and Ibn-Daljig means those who belong, our citizens, is that strong message again. It's a strong political message that informs the government to stay out of the business of trying to determine our citizens, and it's your right as a citizen of each of your nations to determine who your citizens are, and we know who our families are. So based on that, we have Marcia Smoke, who holds the citizenship portfolio for the Anishinaabe Nation Leadership Council. She's from Alderville First Nation with many years of political and entrepreneurial experience, and she's been involved in protecting and advancing inherent rights of our communities regionally and nationally, and even at the international level. So I'm going to call on Marcia Smoke. She's out on the highway right now, a road warrior as she is, but she's still joining us tonight. So I'll turn it over to you for some opening comments, Marcia.
Okay, Anim Bonjour. Nigani Makwakwe and Dishnikaz, Makwandorum, Hamadashkadon, Alderville and Dunjiba. I'll go that route. Okay, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to join you this evening. And yes, you can see I'm in my vehicle, but I'm pulled over. I'm sitting at Henvey Inlet First Nation while the meeting is going on, making my way home. So I want to just say that, the role that I have as portfolio holder is something that has been, I'm in a good place to deal with that, because the issue of citizenship has been on my agenda, my family's agenda, friends, for a long, long time, right back to when Jeanette was doing her work, our commissioner, back in the 70s and 80s. So I just want to, I'm getting a notice here. Am I online still?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I want to make sure that the work that we're doing this evening will continue to set the framework to bring the rest of our relatives back into our family circles who have been excluded by government legislation by the Indian Act. And some of that work, the fact that we're being involved in it now is there's two issues out there. One is the main one that we're following is that we need to be mindful of is the fact that there have been many court cases that have been won as a result of the challenges to the registration under the Indian Act, where some of our family members have been left out. Along with that, with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which was adopted in 2007, that was only endorsed by Canada in 2016 by the Liberal government. And in order to implement UNDRIP in Canada, the intent is to introduce legislation that will, UNDRIP is let me start again here, sorry. In 2019, Canada introduced legislation that would put into place the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. That was called Bill C-15 at the time. And that bill was meant to align Canadian laws with UNDRIP, and issues under the Indian Act fall in that category. So when this bill received royal assent in June 2021, it was up to the government to set and identify all of those various sections of pieces of legislation on what they were working on that had to do with us, and create an action plan to implement the UNDRIP Act. And that's where we are at right now, because under that Act and the action plan, the government has taken the position and that they want to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so creating this collaborative process on the second generation cutoffs and the Section 10 voting threshold are part of this process. Now, we will get into that a little later on. I just wanted to give that brief overview. And but it's very important that we don't forget about the court cases that were won, and because those are where the real details are as to how we got to this point from the First Nations perspective. So I'll just leave it at that, and we can, as I said, we'll be going into more detail later on after the next presentations.
Miigwech, Marcia, and I just want to note for the participants out there that as you hear the presentations, if you have any inquiries or questions, you can put them in the chat. But we're also going to try to make some time available after the key presentations to engage you. And again, as I mentioned, this is the beginning of creating awareness on this issue. There'll be still time for more discussions, particularly at the community level, over the next several months. So I'm going to now introduce our Commissioner on Citizenship, Dr. Jeanette Coibier-Laval. She's a citizen of Okamokong unceded territory and has been a recipient of many awards and honorary doctorates for her lifelong work to protect the rights of Anishinaabe women and children. In 2007 to 2009, Jeanette met with Anishinaabe citizens and leaders to develop Ibin Dogsijig Nagewin. It was ratified by the Anishinaabe Grand Council. So Ibin Dogsijig Nagewin just talks about those who belong, a law about citizens, for our citizens, who belongs to our communities. And that's who you are the experts on, because you know your families. So this law is in response to the second generation cutoff and the loss of our citizens through the loss of Indian status under the Indian Act. And our citizenship law is based on a one-parent rule. It's the framework law for your First Nation citizenship laws. So we know who belongs to our communities. As I said, you know your families better than anyone else. But tonight we're trying to build consensus for this position of our nation about the declaration on our citizenship, those who belong, so that we can, in no uncertain terms, declare to the government that it's only you folks, as the citizens of our communities, have the rights to determine our citizens, not the federal government. So, Jeanette, if you want to take over and do your presentation, please.
Oh, miigwech, Patrick. Ani kinawaya. Giwad nung genin dishnikas. Nishnabe kwendal. Mino mi mampi enjaba nadum nishingesh nikadek. Kadek keket noda. After ngitchinen mino jisemaga kui gnunding. Mino kinaway odeya jikeb zindagejik. It's good to be able to get together to talk again with each other. And especially when we think about all those who are out there listening in this vast territory of ours, and we're looking at the Southwest region. I remember going to this part of our Anishinaabe Nation many years ago now when we were doing our consultations, and it was always so good to be in your communities and to be welcomed. And this is when we were just doing a consultation to deal with the loss of our people. And I had to deal with the loss of my own sense of belonging to my community, and that took place in 1970s. So this is now so many years. It's 55 years now, or is it 54? Anyways, it's been a long time. And we have been able to make some positive changes. And I recognize that, but the time has come now in our current point in history where we really need to take a good look at what the governments that have come to this territory of ours and are bringing other ways of imposing on us through their own government structures. So I appreciate that you're here to talk and to hear about this important aspect of us as a nation. We have always, when we come together, we talk about being a strong Anishinaabe nation. And I would like to just remind you that nations, and this is how we signed our treaties, we signed them as nations, Anishinaabe Nation, in our part of the territory here. But nations have land, we have people, we have language, we have culture, spirituality, and governance. And we still have that. The time has come now where we have to really stress the importance and assert those rights that we had prior to the imposition of the Indian Act. And those rights are our inherent rights, they are our sovereign rights, and we have the determination and the ability has been put into that international document on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So we can also use that to back up our assertion of our inherent rights. So tonight, what I would like to share with you is two aspects. The first is that just to take a quick reminder, I guess, of what we came up with after our consultations many years ago well, it was 12, 15 years ago, when we did our initial consultations, and our people at the community level came up with the recommendation that we will recognize a one-parent rule, and that is so important. And we say one parent, meaning that if you can trace your ancestry through either your father or your mother and go back from there, and it can be done. And we know in our communities, we know how we're related, we know who our ancestors are, and there are documents, there are stories. It's all there. And this is why we need to be so determined to recognize all our people. We don't want to exclude anyone. Remember, nations, we are strong when we have lots of our people, those who belong, and when I say those who belong, Edben Dagzajik. And that is what our people have come up with now when we talk about citizenship in English. But in Anishinaabe, when we are Anishinaabe Nation, we say Edben Dagzajik. And for the law, that's Nakanigewan. So our citizenship law is Edben Dagzajik Nakanigewan. And that's the one parent rule. And tonight we will be talking further on what the Government of Canada, through the Indian Act and Indigenous Services Canada, are looking at, which is a two-parent rule, which is going to be more restrictive. And they're really still trying to eliminate us, and we mustn't forget that. So to share with all of you, and I will try and do this as quickly as I can, we had a gathering, special gathering, where all our communities, our people were invited to come to Bauting on January 29th. And there were quite a few who attended, and we looked at what was going on, and the sense was that we must be unified. We have to stress our unity. And to do that, let's look at what we know about ourselves. And the main goal of that gathering was to come up with a declaration for our use, that we can go along with the Edben Dagzajik laws that we come up with at our community level. But this will be the overall Anishinaabe Declaration on Edben Dagzajik. And it'll be like the Gudwe Wanagas that we talk about when we say our prayer, whenever we get together. It's an overlying declaration. This is ours. It will be ours. So if we look at that, has been boiled down to 7 core principles, and recognizing this is coming from our people. It's not coming from outside. So the first one, and if you will see it there on the screen, it's the Creator placed in Anishinaabe on earth along with the gift of spirituality. And that is part of our Godobe Wanagazet prayer that we start out with as well. That is our bottom line. We know we have this special gift. Creator gave us sovereignty to govern ourselves. We mustn't forget that, especially now. It was given to us when we came to this land that we call Turtle Island. It was given to us when the Creator created us. So that's our right, and we must practice that sovereign right. We belong to the land, and we follow our own laws. And our elders have been telling us this all the time. We are people who belong to the land. Our very essence is connected to the land that we were born on, the land that we were placed, and the land that we have been given all the special gifts for us to survive. Those lands we still have, and we have to really recognize that we must assert our sovereignty on those other lands that others are trying to take away from us as well. So number 4, which is the right of any nation, we have the right to determine who our people are. No one can argue with that. Nations know who their people are. They have that right. And why the government is still trying to take that away from us, along with their new process called under this Indigenous collaborative process, where they want to restrict us to 2 generations and then you're cut off. No, that's not acceptable. So that is, once again, we will be exploring further. But no, keep in mind, we have our own Edmund Declaration, or Knocknagewan, I should say, and that's what we have to keep telling to the government. And after tonight's discussion here, you'll be able to say, plus, we have our own Anishinaabe Declaration on Edmund and that will be available to you. It will also be available in Anishinaabe. Thank goodness we were able to get some of our elders who worked and put it all into Anishinaabe. But what you see on the screen right now is the one in English, just for getting through the process. So I was in 5. Now let me look at, no, I finished 4. Now we're looking at 5. Through our own governance principles and structures, we decide who belongs. Once again, that is going back to our Edwendowsajik Knocknagewan, the law that we came up with in consultation with our people. That's the one-parent rule. Number 6, together, all of us, we take care of each other. The earth, the water, the air, fire, and all our relations. And that's so beautiful, you know, when we're talking about that sense of unity. And it's written right there. It's in English, but it's also in Anishinaabe. I don't have the official one in Anishinaabe, but it's so good to be able to say that in Anishinaabe, to know our place on this land that we have been given, and our responsibilities to all our relations, all the other living beings that live on this land. And it's important to recognize that. So number 7, and this is, as I said, there were 7 key principles that were drafted. We assert and exercise our inherent right of self-determination for the protection of our lands and our Edwendowsajik, as affirmed by the Anishinaabe Nation Edwendowsajik Knocknagewan in 2008. So we have affirmed through the leadership and through all our Edwendowsajik who were at those meetings in 2008, we accepted and approved our Edwendowsajik Knocknagewan. That's the law, that's the code, the one-parent rule. That's in place. And now we have the declaration. The declaration, if we go to the next page there, these are the 4 core 7 principles. But then we also came up with an addendum. If we could have, there it is. The addendum are all those other principles and guides that were brought up at our meeting. We have been on this land and we governed this land since time immemorial. Now, we know that through our legends, through our stories. We didn't come across the Bering Strait. We've always been here. And that can be proven now with some of our archaeologists, and especially with this Cree archaeologist who's finding artifacts that we have been here for over 60,000 years. So no one can dispute that. Our treaty rights shall be protected and practiced by our Edwendowsajik. Edwendowsajik, those who belong. And we have done that with our treaty rights, and we will continue to do that and ensure that they are protected. And that has been happening within our 4 regions in the Anishinaabe Nation. We will assert our Dodemic system and adoption laws according to our kinships and customs with the key principles of inclusion and equality. And it's been coming out more and more through our head gets it, Gordon Wandabens. He talked more about the clan systems. We need to find out our clans, look at the responsibilities of our clans, and how we interact with each other, how we support each other. And that is all there and available All we have to do is ask, and it will be shared with us. So, and we can start practicing that. And I know that there are some questions about adoption laws. Well, it's there, and it will be made easier to understand once we have our Todemok system in place. And those are our teachings as well. We will reinforce our traditional governance principles and structures. And that is coming out more and more. When we get together, I see that we're recognizing, yes, we have our history. This is the way it was done. And we will ensure that we do it again. We will continue to teach our children our laws and traditional ways as Nishnabek to protect the seventh generation. That is another big responsibility. And as a grandmother now, I have 7 grandchildren, and I have to recognize that this is so important at my age and stage and my role now within my family, within my community. I need to share and teach our young children. I was in the school system, but this is different. This is my role within our clan system. And I'm part of the Bird Clan. Those are the teachers within our system. And it's to ensure that our children, for the next generations to come, will also have that history and will also be able to maintain who we are. Okay, so it continues, and we will unite, and this is what our Gimak are talking about, that we must unite, and we can do that. And because, especially right now, of the way that others are trying to look at our rights and sovereign rights. But through unity, we can do that. We'll continue and practice our spiritual laws, because this is what we have been taught through the grandfather teachings and through our elders, that we need to really continue practicing this because it is so important. It is who we are. And then we look at the United Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and I mentioned that. That would be a resource that we can use, and as we get to work within our communities to draft, to come up with our own Edwin. And I guess just to remind everyone that what we have drafted at our top level is that the one-parent rule, and we have one available, but it's just an example. It's basic. It's the core recognition of a one-parent rule. You can take that and you enhance it, you add to it, you make it relevant to what your needs are at your community, and that's what you will be able to follow within your communities. So we are looking at the declaration that I was just sharing with you to be ratified. There are going to be 4 regional get-togethers, sessions in the next month. And then we will be looking at our Grand Council Assembly, which will be taking place sometime in June 2025. At which
No, it's the first week of June.
did I say that wrong? No.
Yeah, it's the first week of June.
What? Anyways, I'll just sign off by sharing all this with you, that it's important that we look at this declaration. It is going to be shared with all of you, and it will be ratified at our next Grand Council Assembly. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us.
So Miigwech Jeanette, and just again, the Grand Council is the first week of June. And I believe it's being held in the Southwest region, come to think of it. And I want to open up the floor here for anyone who has questions at this juncture. We're going to take a few minutes to do that. And again, if you put something in the chat line, I'm going to ask Dave to read anything that's in the chat line. But please put your questions here. We're going to take some time for questions. And again, I just want to keep reiterating, even what you've heard here or you've seen on the draft declaration, there's still opportunity, to comment or put some key points that you want onto the draft declaration or information that could be included in the addendum. That's why we're having these virtual sessions, and that's why we'll be revisiting this at each of the regional meetings leading up to the Grand Council. So I just wanted to reiterate that. So open the floor for any questions. I don't know if there's anyone on there right now, Marcy.
Yeah,
has a
there's a
question?
few people, but nobody has questions. Don't be shy. You can put your hand up and I can unmute you to allow you to talk,
Okay.
or you can put it in the chat. I don't think there's any questions yet, but maybe there will be some
Can
later
always
on.
go
All right.
back.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll carry on. There will be an opportunity again after the next presentation. Again, if you think of something, put it in the chat, or we'll come on to we'll make some time again after the next presentation. So I'm going to bring back Marcia Smoke again. To give an overview about what Canada's agenda and what they're doing in their process, just so you know what's going on with those guys and why it's so important to keep in mind that we have our own process based on our declaration and based on our rights. So I'll turn it over to our Southeast Regional Chief, Marcia Smoke, from the Leadership Council and the portfolio she carries for citizenship. So go ahead, Marcia.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Okay, so just to carry on with what I was talking about earlier, Canada's agenda is more aligned with the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples Act. So it's not based on the actual declaration. It's based on the act that they created in Parliament and their action plan that accompanies it. So what they've done is they've put some timelines on how they're going to proceed. And right now, we are on phase 2 of their planning, and this work is not something that is unfamiliar to First Nations. Okay, certainly when it comes to First Nations band councils, whether it's current leadership or past leadership, but this work has been from the government side. They have been actively sending out their information to the First Nations whenever they have something that they want to bring to our attention. Of course, they're not going to send us everything. So right now, to do this work on the second generation cutoff, this is as a result of what they view as the details that fall out of the court cases that we've won. So the process, which is called collaborative process on second generation cutoff, they want to wrap this up by the winter of 2027. And we've been fortunate with from the Anishinaabe Nation to have our Commissioner Jeanette Corbière-Lavelle involved in this for many, many years. And she's been our commissioner for approximately 15 years, I would say, probably more. And she's been involved in the with the Anishinaabe Nation, with the Indigenous Advisory Process, which was set up by government to move this, move the registration membership forward. So we've got that consistent representation there, and over that period of time, and I believe it's probably one of the reasons why it's taken so long for us to get to this stage, because the government and us we want to know what kind of effect an influx of new band members will have on our communities. And right now, even though we are estimating 300,000 additional members on, that will be added, the figure is actually anywhere from 270,000 to 400,000. So along with that comes the big question of the funding that's going to be required to support new members coming into our First Nations. So that's a big consideration, and it has been in play for quite some time. And then, of course, that guideline, or the timeline. We're now in a place where we're engaging with First Nations. We have a number of tools that we're working with, and I'm going to repeat them because even though Patrick talked about them and Jeanette talked about them, we are dealing with resolutions that have been in place at the Anishinaabe Nation that directs us to deal with membership. Okay, we also have a citizenship law that was created that and all First Nations were involved in this discussion many years ago, and that was to look at to adopt the one-parent rule. And then from there, we have now a declaration, and that was the one that we were talking about. Jeanette went over it in detail. That was created in January 29th in Sault Ste. Marie. A lot of First Nations were in attendance. Oh, sorry, losing my camera here, my phone. So a lot of First Nations were in attendance, and how we got this declaration was we went around the room and we asked people to state what was important to them to have in a declaration, and so that's where we're at with that, and that's a draft document. And what we committed ourselves to doing was, with the people present, we said, okay, we'll take your information back, we'll put it into a format, and we'll hold virtual sessions so that we can share the information, make sure that this is what was, that we captured the essence of what people's comments were. And this declaration is meant to be basically a framework, an overview, to a reminder that these are the things that we have to consider when it's time to do the work in the communities. So, and I want to emphasize that the community work is where all of these details have to be worked out, and it's not new information either. In 2000, roughly 19, the government appointed a special representative to hold meetings right across the country. It was just before COVID, and I went through the list of all of those communities that were present, and I believe that 37 of the 39 Anishinaabe Nation communities were all involved in that. So that would probably be the most recent consistent work that was done on this process and on membership. So we're at a stage now where we want to share this information. We want to have you have some tools available for you to look at creating your own citizenship law. And so what that means is that we're not the ones that are going to be writing up, who our members are. That's the work that has to be undertaken in your community. And things that have to be addressed are topics like gender role, adoption, birthing, death, marriage, dotems, belonging, family composition, intertribal transfers, and cross-border recognition. It's very important that the conversations take place in your community to deal with these kinds of points. Now, with the work of the citizenship law, it's also important to understand that we've had a lot of developments across Ontario specifically, where we need to take control of our citizenship. We have conflicts and assertions by the Métis Nation of Ontario. I was reminded in the after our virtual session in the Southeast this week that we have to include the Algonquins of Ontario that also are not cannot prove their ancestry. So we have to be very strong in putting our positions forward and creating those citizenship laws by each community. Some may be the same, but everyone it's up to everyone to do their own work there. And we're one of those resolutions is that that was adopted many years ago was that our First Nations will follow the one-parent rule. Now, the next chart that's coming up, it shows how the Indian Act status currently works. And while this chart here might be somewhat familiar to everyone, I'll just say people are registered by 6.1 and 6.2, and but what is not well known is that there are 14 different categories on 6.1. So this is why you will have siblings, a brother and a sister, for instance. The brother may be able to register his children, his grandchildren will get registered, and yet his sister may not be able to register her grandchildren. We see that it's still affecting affecting being able to continue that membership onto our people. So this 6.1.6.1 equals to 6.1, 6.1.6.2 equals to 6.1, 6.2.6.2 will be a 6.1. And then where we start to lose the status is when we've got a 6.1 member that fathers a child with with someone with no status. That person becomes that child becomes a 6.2, and then on the next generation where we have a 6.2 member and a parent with no status, then that's where the child loses the status. So I believe that when we finish this work, these charts are going to be available on social media. I know the ones for the when we discussed this on with the Southeast region, these charts were put up on social media, and of course they're available on the Anishinaabe Nation website. But when we look at having a one-parent rule, that will ensure that we are able to that membership, that status will continue on with our future generation. So just be mindful that the citizenship law that was created by the Anishinaabe Nation is only to sets out how we trace our descendancy through a one-parent rule, because as Jeanette stated, the way that the government is sending out the information, how they want to make this available, or how they want to determine our membership, they want us to go with a two-parent rule, and all that means is yes, it just delays removing our children and grandchildren from the membership. So I believe that this document is probably shared perhaps in the chat. So the next part I want to talk about very briefly is some unfinished business with Bill C-38. Bill C-38 was something that was presented in Parliament. It has to do with the inequities that were faced by are family members whose parents or grandparents were enfranchised. So when enfranchisement came in for various reasons, that families or individuals enfranchised, what it meant was that the children, grandchildren, the children were automatically removed from the Indian registry and lost all their rights as well. So you could effectively have a woman who was from the community, a status woman, marrying someone who is enfranchised, who is still full Indian, and I use that word because that's how it is under the Indian Act, and that woman will be enfranchised, even though the person that she's married is, because that person has lost their status through enfranchisement, she will lose her status, or she has lost her status because that person is not considered an Indian. So the importance of Bill C-38 is that rather than going through this process of 6162, 61, point one, all those 14 categories, under Bill C-38, the full status will be provided back to anyone who has lost their membership, lost their registration under the Indian Act. And there are about 3,500 people across the country that will be eligible under Bill C-38. So we don't want to, because they are automatically going to be given that full status, we don't want to see them lumped into the second generation cutoff work, because then it makes them vulnerable to to whatever government decides down the road. So what I would like to leave you with on this part of the presentation is that, I believe that, we have to work from a position of inclusion versus exclusion. And I say that because one of, my mother taught us from a very early age to don't leave anyone behind. And we, through circumstances of legislation, our people have been left behind, and we can't do that anymore. So that is the part on second generation cutoff. I'm running over time here. So the next part has to do with the Section 10 voting threshold, and it affects the like under the membership. Section 11 are those who are still managing the registration under the Indian Act. Section 10 are those First Nations who have chosen to create their own membership codes and be the ones who add their members. The difference between Section 10 and Section 11 is that anyone that is added by the First Nation under Section 10, they are provided with the membership, but they don't have status. So government still is implicating or implicating themselves on interfering with what we can do with once we decide on our own members. So this is the reason why we have to get it right. And I'm just going to go briefly over these Section 10 voting thresholds and just for what's on the screen. So the Section 10 voting threshold issue refers to the double majority vote required for First Nations to transition from Section 11 to Section 10 under the Indian Act. And when transitioning to Section 10, First Nations can take control over their membership by establishing their own rules and codes, and that's what I just talked about before. So the introduction of Bill C-31 in 1985 created those two options for controlling the band membership. And Section 10 and Section 11 of the Indian Act, making the registration and membership distinct. So when specifically under section 10, when we talk about the voting thresholds. Right now, it's almost manageable because we only have a certain amount of members in our community, and although some have difficulty reaching those thresholds now, once we have the second generation in place, so that we are dealing with a one-parent rule, what that means is that there will be such a large influx, maybe like not large, but there will be an influx of members to the First Nation, and it's going to be very difficult to reach those voting thresholds to move from Section 11 under the government having control of the Indian Act to where we are Indian Registry, to where we take care of that ourselves. So I guess just the final remark that I want to make, and that has to do with the message that was given by our Grand Council Chief. And she said that we are at a critical time where we must act quickly from a position of unity and strength to respond to another impending threat to our sovereignty and nationhood, represented by Canada's collaborative process on the second generation cutoff and the Section 10 voting threshold. So I'll leave it at that, and turn this back over to Chairman, our Governance Commissioner, Patrick So-Miigwech.
Gretch, Marcia. Again, I'm going to open up the lines here. If anyone has any comments or questions at this juncture, or if you put anything in the chat line. So we'll take some time right now. Does anyone have any questions? Marcy, do you see anybody with their hand up?
No, you guys can put your hand up. There's a raise hand function at the bottom. If you have a question, I can unmute you. Or you can put a question in the chat if you have one, or a comment even.
And also just so you know, there will be further opportunity to comment, and if you think of something even after this session is over, you know, and have your pen ready there towards the end. I'm going to give you you know, a place that you can ask questions as I'm making closing remarks. So after this session is over, you know, there'll still be an opportunity to pose questions, you know, to the Citizenship Commissioner, and so I'll relay that at the end as we're winding down. So if there's anyone has anything, is there anything in the chat so far, or is there any questions from any of the participants?
No, everyone's really quiet. That's okay.
Okay, well, let's carry on. That'll give us a little more time again near the end for another opportunity if somebody comes up with something. Right now, I'm going to be introducing Leslie McGregor. She's the CEO of Moknagon. Now, this is the work that's been going on self-governance with a number of communities, and they're working on developing you know, models of how they're going to develop their citizenship laws, you know, enforcing, you know, our inherent jurisdictions over citizenship, you know, and other areas of governance. And it's important, you know, for her to just, you know, give a brief perspective of what some of the First Nations are experiencing in developing their citizenship laws. So I'll turn it over to you, Leslie, at this juncture. You want to go ahead?
Miigwech, and I appreciate the time allotted for us to be in this for these important gatherings. So I think one of the key things that I want to emphasize, and that's part of the work that we're doing, I think is this this notion of nation building. And I had attended a seminar last week, and they were talking about nation building and law development. And when they were talking about it, they highlighted 4 areas that were important for nation building itself. So the first one was development of a constitution. The second one was their citizenship laws. The third one had to do with operations and just governance in general for First Nations. And then the last one had to do with managing land. And certainly because of my role at Moknagon, this idea of citizenship and the work that the communities are doing, that point really hit home with me. So I wanted to talk briefly about that before I get into what the communities are doing. So I think that the citizenship laws themselves, they strengthen our self determination, and it's fundamental when you want to empower our nations and really exercise self governance. I think that by establishing these laws, we affirm our right to make decisions, and certainly the ones that impact our members and communities. And that reinforces our autonomy and self determination. The second point about that is the recognition of inherent rights. This process of creating citizenship laws, they involve recognizing our inherent rights, and that predates colonial rule. This acknowledgement also validates our identity and sovereignty as Indigenous peoples or Anishinaabe peoples, which is essential in nation building, as it not only restores but honors our historical rights. And then the last part of that, I wanted to mention that it uses Indigenous knowledge in it. Our citizenship laws in that development allows for the integration of traditional knowledge and values, and certainly that is prevalent when we talk about the one parent rule. And then using certainly culturally relevant frameworks that address modern challenges today. So I think, as I said, the First Nations that are signatories to the Anishinaabe Nation Governance Agreement, the first pillar they chose to work on was citizenship, and that was critical, not only because of the assertion or the work that they were doing around the Robinson Huron Treaty, because a lot of the members are fall under that treaty, but because it's when you look at nations themselves in your communities, it always starts with who belongs there. So one of the things that they had asked from Monkenagon as that support mechanism for them were law templates to help them when in the development of these laws. So we worked on with Falls Law Group a template for citizenship laws, but those were only to give the laws structure, and the key component of that one certainly is the aspect of enforceability at some point, or certainly conflict resolution or redressing challenges or appeals that people may have. But I think when I talk about these citizenship laws, there were successes and there were challenges. When we talk about the successes, what we identified was there was a collaborative approach by a lot of the First Nations. They certainly were talking to each other about their citizenship committees and how they were integrating what they were learning from one another. And I think that really is important in terms of information sharing and best practices and learning from each other. But then you're going to get some level of standardization amongst them. I think the other part of it is that it really encourages community involvement. So these citizenship committees are comprised of citizens in the community, and they're that link to leadership. So they're the ones going out and gathering the information and working with the community in their engagements to see what that law would actually look like. So in that, you're going to have diverse perspectives, which is really handy or critical, rather, when you're looking at laws and making sure that you're looking at all angles of it. And it also makes it more representative of the community's needs. So the other parts of it was the community support, and you can see that through this process. You have the chief and council and the citizenship committees working together and working with the community at large to really try and address all the components that need to be addressed when we're looking at citizenship. And I think those levels start to build trust, and they build trust between the community and leadership. I think another point was the utilization of existing resources. So they were looking at, what type of skill sets, even if you're doing community asset mapping, what you can bring in to help you to build those laws, and then certainly looking at Monkenagon to help them do that. And I think, as I said before, the templates are only to give them an idea of what could be included in those, and it was really up to the communities to add the meat to it, right, to really flesh it out and tailor it to their own needs. So the other, I guess the final one is that what I liked about it is that the communities and the citizenship committees are really looking to be like proactive, have proactive solutions to what they're doing. So, you know, they're looking at all these different challenges, what kind of information can support it, and address the challenges. And by doing that, they're making a stronger law. With anything, there's always going to be challenges. Some of the challenges are understanding and communication. There's some of the language, especially when you're looking at laws, can be complex, and you know, text or oh, I can't think of the word, but really heavy in the terminology. So making sure that those are accessible to everybody and where they are in the community becomes really important, so that people feel involved in that. Um, it, I think if you don't do that, then it can lead to mistrust and slightly break down communication. So by having things in plain language, then people feel more involved, and it makes better sense for everyone. And communication becomes really important in that, in making sure the information is going out, making sure that people have the opportunity to read and have meaningful discussions on what those can look like. I think the other another issue is around engagement and trust. You know, citizenship isn't necessarily a really hot topic, and you're competing with other events like community discussions on the Robinson Huron Treaty, or you know, these other things. So you're competing against all these other challenges and issues that are going on in communities. So getting people out and getting people engaged requires more effort and I say communication from the governance directors in these communities. And I think as we move along and you really start to get you know, these communication strategies going, you get people interested, you get people motivated, because really when you look at it, especially, you know, we look at the implications of the Robinson Huron Treaty for government, where they're paying out a lot of money, and certainly coming up with the Robinson Superior Treaty, it's in government's best interest to really limit status people, right? Because then they'll have to pay out money. So I think, you know, really getting people to see that this type of thing impact all these other critical issues that are going on in the communities. I think when you look at some of the other issues, certainly you don't want to get into positions of like resource guarding. I know when we were talking in my own community about, let's say, the Robinson Huron, it was like people started to try and eliminate, okay, well, no, they're not really status, or they're just trying to get their status, or you certainly have an influx of people trying to get membership because they want to be part of, you know, the per capita distribution that happened with the Robinson Huron. So you have these kinds of uh, issues going on in the communities where people start to know, you know, because it becomes a kind of that resource guarding. But I think it flows out from there to things like housing, things like land, and certainly the kinds of services that are provided for First Nation people in these communities. And then the last one I think is really important, and that's that inclusivity and ongoing commitment, not only from these citizenship committees, but from the elected leadership, to really make sure that people are involved, that things are in plain language, that we're addressing all these other issues that are coming up. And really, I think, you know, with Marcia and Jeanette were saying earlier about promoting this inclusivity, that, you know, this is something that we want to look for our future generations and create these systems where they're going to be recognized and acknowledged within it, because that, you know, there's all sorts of other things that that happen when people don't feel like they belong. And I think that's it for me. I hope I got you ahead of schedule there, Patrick.
Rich, again, I'm going to open up the opportunity for folks if you've got some comments or questions. Thank you, Leslie. So, we got anything, Marcy, on the people with their hand up or anything in the chat line so far?
No, Lily just says miigwech for the information so far. Anyone, if you have a question, please raise your hand. There's a raised hand function and I can allow you to speak, or you can put your comments or question in the chat.
I think if you think of something as well, even after this session is over, if you want to write this down, LaRonde Mary, one word, LaRondemary @gmail.com. You can see it there in the chat. If you pose questions, Mary assists our citizenship commissioner and would appreciate receiving any questions or feedback, and they ensure that if you've got commentary on the declaration or the addendum to the declaration, or with respect to the presentations, it would be most appreciated. So again, waiting to see if anyone has any comments or questions.
Quiet bunch tonight.
Yes. Well, again, I want to reemphasize what's been said by Marcia, and I mentioned it earlier. The real work has to happen at the community level. We're just creating awareness. We're also advocating the establishment of this Anishinaabeg Citizenship Declaration, which sends a strong message to the government and sends a strong message to our own people. That it's only us that has the right to determine citizenship, and not the federal government to continue this tinkering around with the Indian Act, trying something again with this two-parent rule stuff that it shouldn't fool you to think that they've got the solution. All that does is delay elimination of our people by one generation. The one-parent rule has been vetted, and a consultation took place over time, and it very clearly shows that the lineage of one-parent rule, would continue our Anishinaabeg forever. And that's why Marcia talked about, let's practice inclusion. When this issue has come up, people talk about things like blood quantum and all that kinds of other things, but those are not Anishinaabe or First Nation types of how citizens are determined. Those are Bureau of Indian Affairs in the States and federal government in Canada, Indian Act ways of trying to again eliminate our people. So
we do have a question, Pat.
Okay, great.
Robin's wondering, how do we ensure the community is properly informed and have the opportunity to give feedback to this?
Okay, does somebody want to take that on, or I can answer it?
Go ahead, Pat.
Yes, this is I think a real call, I guess, to talk to your leadership about creating awareness for the full community. We will be promoting and information being sent out to the communities. The availability of the Anishinaabeg Nation and the Moknagon staff to come and supply information, to even come to your communities is there. That's a given. I hope that you take advantage of that. So we want to make sure that folks have every opportunity to participate in this, and we're at a crucial juncture here where I think it's absolutely essential that we create this awareness, and that's why I said at the start of the session tonight, we have a limited number of folks participating tonight, so you need to talk to your friends, you need to talk to your families, you need to talk to your leadership, that there needs to be an opportunity to have this kind of a dialogue take place in our communities, and really start getting down to the nitty-gritty of having that robust discussion. And the other thing, Marcia was outlining, there's a whole number of different topics that need to be flushed out in our communities. And obviously, when we talk about our citizens, we're talking about all of our citizens, no matter where they live. That's also been a divisive tactic that the federal government has used to say this on reserve, off reserve thing. You don't lose your rights the minute you cross the bridge to go off your community, or cross the highway to go off your community. You're still a Anishinaabe of the 4 communities in Southwest, just as the other 35 communities. Their citizens are citizens no matter where they live. So it's important to remember that. We have to decolonize our thinking. As I said, to think about who our families are is crucial to this discussion. So I really hope I answered your question there, because there's going to be more opportunities again with upcoming regional meetings, the Grand Council. This is not going to be something that's just going to happen like real quick. We have a lot of work to do yet at the community level to ensure that we get First Nations citizens' input on the development of this declaration, but more importantly, the work that needs to take place in each of your communities on the development of your citizenship laws. I was going to mention this in my closing comments, but I'll mention it now. There's a concept in law called you occupy the field, and when we haven't occupied the field in an area of exerting jurisdiction or exerting our rights, that's when we allow these federal, provincial, and other institutions to come in and try to tell us how we should live our lives. We need to occupy the field by developing our own laws, especially in this area of citizenship. I mean, who are we without our citizens? We're nothing without our citizens. That's the most important element of who we are as Anishinaabe people.
So Pat, there's a
I
good
think-
question that goes with that. Is there a deadline for First Nations to have their citizenship law established and enacted?
I wouldn't say there's a specific deadline set. I think we're, with some of the work that's going on with some of the communities that are involved with the governance processes, there's several years available for that work to take place. But I think in response to getting ahead of the federal government's plan, to ram something down our throats again, we are emphasizing the need to get this declaration in place, fairly soon. As I said, we hope to have feedback from these virtual sessions and feedback from the regional meetings. There's regional meetings taking place throughout the month of April. Southeast is having one on April 8th. Southwest is having one, I think, in London around the 10th of September. Lake Huron on the 16th.
April.
This is all April. And Northern Superior on the 23rd. And of course, the Grand Council is the first week of June. So we're hoping to get this declaration, put in place so that we're ready ahead of the government, preempt the government's plan to try to ram another piece of legislation down our throats, and send them a very strong message, that we are the only ones that can determine our citizens.
Pat, I'd like to add on to that, Marcia.
Go ahead.
This collaborative process, because they have set a deadline up for the winter of 2027, I believe. The work that we're doing right now to have First Nations start working on all of those various items, it doesn't mean that they have to complete their citizenship law, but what it does mean is that any input that they can provide by May 28th to say how they want to be able to determine their own membership. That date is set, and that's where we advocate, at the very minimum, the one-parent rule. And the actual putting your actual citizenship law will take a long time, but we need to have something that is going to government, fairly quickly. And I know that there was, the government did put a call out for proposals. Dave just put that in the chat, I believe. There was a call out for proposals. The deadline was March, a couple weeks ago. to get funding so that people could do some work in their communities, or it was also available to organizations and tribal councils and so on. So there has been funding made available for First Nations to be able to do this exploratory work and have these conversations. But like I say, this is not new information. This is something that has been worked on for, a couple decades, and it's just all coming. That information just needs to be brought forward on, the comments that were made in the past. So
I'll repeat once again as well. If there's any community events or maybe reach out to the chief and council to invite support staff from the Anishinaabe Nation or our citizenship commissioner Jeanette Laval, Jeanette Corbier Laval, or others to come and provide direct information to your communities. There's no cost to the community to do that. That's part of our role to come and work with your community. So that is there. So the work is ongoing, but the federal government could be implementing their legislation again. Things have been a little bit fluid with the fact that there was a Liberal leadership competition recently where Mark Carney got in. It was on the news today that he's looking at calling an election by possibly the 28th of April. All these things will impact, the schedule of when their legislation gets implemented. But I think, there's some indications are that this may happen, as early as next fall or late fall. But we want to get ahead of that. That's why we're talking to folks about the declaration. So we have a question here from Jack Beaver. Could you read that out for Dave? It went by so quick on the screen.
I've got it here.
Okay.
Jeanette, can you see it?
No, I was just going to make a comment, prior. I didn't see the other question, but just to add on to what Pat said about the necessity of working on this, because it's crucial right now when we see what's happening with the other governments that we have to deal with at the federal level, provincial level, especially when we look at what's happening provincially to the north of us, where they're wanting to open up that area to look at mining and the minerals, and then they're looking at water resources, and then all what's happening south of us. So if we don't deal with this soon, so we can make a strong impact and a statement telling those other governments, the ones who are the settler governments, that this is land that we shared with you through our treaties, and we are nations, and we have all the essentials of nationhood, and we have our citizenship laws, and it's not up to anyone else to decide who our people are. And if we can get that done at the community level, if you want to get your committees together with your membership people, membership clerks, your councils, your GIMOC, and we'd be glad to assist in any way possible. Mary and I are working on this, and we would be pleased to assist in any way to help any of our communities to start working on this. And then we have the other resources with Leslie under Bamachnigan, and the resources are there. We should even be able to have our own passports. We talked about that. I mean, there are so many things that we could be enacting as a government, as a nation, I want to say, and through those governance structures that we could put in. Now, I didn't get the chat.
We've got about 4 minutes left, so could you put that chat question back up, please?
Yeah, I'll just ask it. Why has the enfranchisement issue not been settled yet? It's just plain racist.
Marcia, could you
can-
tackle that?
Sure. The bill that was advanced to deal with the enfranchisement with C-38. It was introduced in the House of Commons, and it went through second reading. And from second reading, it was supposed to go to committee, and that was well over a year ago. And it was stalled there. There wasn't it seemed like there wasn't the will of the government to bring that back refer it to the committee and to bring it back for third reading. Everything that was in there was consistent with what the court case called for. And that's why I say it's very important that we don't forget about those court cases, because this is where the work stems from when it comes to recognizing our rights. So it's just a matter of the government didn't find the will to advance that. And it's not from lack of trying. I know that our Grand Council chief sent a letter to the Minister of Indigenous Services Canada, as far, soon after she was elected, to be able to encourage them or push them to have that bill reintroduced. And had the government not been prorogued, it would have still been on the docket to move forward. But once the government was prorogued, then the bill dies on the order table. So that's why it has to be reintroduced.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes
Another
left.
point. I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say another point on the enfranchisement. If we have our own laws, the Bendausijik Nakanigewan, we can deal with that. We wouldn't have to worry what the federal government is going to say about enfranchisement. We would design our own law at the Bendausijik Nakanigewan to fit our community under the one-parent rule. Miigwech, that's, I guess, my closing comment.
Okay. Any last opportunity for questions or chats? We got about another minute or so. Anything on the screen, Marcy?
No.
Okay. I think I'll wind down. Again, if you have more questions or any input, please contact Mary Laronde, and it was flashed in the chat. Her contact, laronde.mary@gmail.com. And I guess I just can't stress enough how important this declaration is to our future, and we need to take a stand, to really protect our nation, our communities, and our inherent rights. We have to tell this government under no uncertain terms that we as an Anishinaabe nation have the strength that we haven't really fully realized yet, and that's where this unity and really will to assert this rights that we have to determine our own citizenship. So this declaration on our citizenship is at the core of who we are, and with the laws that will be created with the Chinaaquniegewan, the Constitution of the as expressed with our one family, Goodway Gods of the Anishinaabe, we are expressing our identity as Anishinaabe people. And we used to hear our elder Gordon Wandabesbaugh say, a duck is a duck, a moose is a moose, and a Anishinaabe is a Anishinaabe. And you can't be anything else. And I don't, for the life of me, understand why over 150 years, the federal government has been trying to tinker and eliminate our people. And so we have to take the stand and advance these principles of our core documents and really define our future. That's what I said about occupy the field. So we're going to be building consensus. That's our next steps, build consensus, go through these regional chiefs meetings and then the Grand Council. And this declaration will be taken into ceremony. It's very important that all the work we do is taken into ceremony. We've already talked to the head the head elder, about the necessary pipe ceremony that will ratify the final product. So that's been something we've tried to do all along with all these important processes, is make sure that there's ceremony involved. So I will close off the session. I say Chimigwech to all of you that participated. I'm going to ask Donna to close us off in the, with a closing. But Chimigwech to all you people that took the time to come out tonight. And again, please talk to your neighbors, talk to your families, talk to the chiefs and councils of your communities. Let's all get together and make sure that we're driving the bus here. Miigwech.
Aha. Busho, Bevdi Quedang, the one Shabbat Quendo, Egon do Demawe. She can get in and not Magna. Mr. Jaquemi with time Devon get me, but John get Sonic, Wisconsin on a gig, not give it copy. Give it some Dutch gate, give it or gate, she can does it. Give another more young son when they went just among when they get Jinad more young when it's in the Minok young one, washing out more niche and Shabe and Nanek. You got John again when the Tita get. Kinegero ishi tas chua de chinda women question mi question on ke on that na ka sin da che ke na ga be shis kon ne at chinda nai man da wat kat bat the mention da mi da mi question kidding mi gwach.
Have a great evening, all you citizens in the Southwest First Nations, and have a fantastic week. All the best to all of you. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Mi gwach.
Bye.
Bye, Mom.